Conference, a very, very good morning. I'm really, really thrilled to have Theo De Jager, the president of the World Farmers Organization, here today. It's hard, and I hope today will put into context the challenges and why the world's farmers do need to come together to influence policy, and climate change being a massive case in point. And I think Theo will cover COP27 in Egypt, which is going to be our chance as farmers, the best chance we've had to date, and probably the best chance we will have for a few years to come to get that message across. The first General Assembly I went to, the WFO, was in Zambia, which is pretty much one of the great sort of African success stories. And it will stay with me forever and a day. It was in April 2016. And the WFO is made up of pretty much, the demographic of the whole world. So you've got the Russians there, you've got the Europeans there, you've got the US there. And yes, you have got the African subsistence farmers there, and they are all in the same room. And I have to say, managing the testosterone levels is quite a challenge, because the US get very bullish, and it is an extraordinary dynamic. But back in 2016, we were, of course, in the run-up to the referendum here. And there was a South African farmer who stood up and gave a presentation to everybody there about what it's like to farm in South Africa when you face, on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, on-farm murder and torture. And I came back from Zambia going into the referendum thinking, God, we just don't know we're born. I mean, here we are squabbling around, lack of detail on what out means, whether the NFU should take a position or not. And we don't know we're born. We farm in peacetime, we completely take it for granted. So farmers across the world face very, very different challenges. Theo farms in the Kruger National Park, and he's been a phenomenal leader of what I can only say is, well, it certainly makes my job look like a walk in the park, I can tell you. So please, will you give a very, very warm welcome to Theo De Jager, President of the World Farmers.
I once visited the United Nations official in his office to try to negotiate a partnership on one of our campaigns. And as I walked into his office, I saw this huge picture on the wall, from the floor to the ceiling. The picture was marked 5th Avenue, New York, 1900. And it was a picture of a street full of horses and coaches. And there was one Model T Ford amongst them. And I asked this official, what is this all about? He said, it's about that picture. And when I turned around, on the opposite wall, there was an equally big picture marked 5th Avenue, New York, 1912. And the whole street was full of cars. And there was one horse, one cartridge. I said to him, all this changed in 12 years? He said to me, look at this picture again, with the horses. They did nothing wrong. Their biggest sin was not to understand what that car means. Well, the more tragic part of this story is actually the farmers who bred these horses. They thought that mankind would always need transport. Let's breed them bigger and faster and stronger. And a mere 12 years later, they were completely irrelevant. I want to talk to you about the car between the horses. Thank you so much for having invited me here. Thank you, Minette, for the example you are as a farmer's leader, and the inspiration you are, and all the support I got from you over the last few years, and all the advice. Thank you, NFU. your secretariat. Thank you for Keris Jones. I considered stealing her away. Then I realized we cannot afford her. Keris has been in charge of our climate change policy committee in World Farmers Organization, and she's really been a pillar of knowledge and capacity, and she has a bottomless supply of energy. And NFU has not only taken the lead when it came to policy development on climate change, but you've also opened up new horizons for farmers across the globe when you committed to net zero. I will never forget that day. When it happened, before the end of that day, I had 4 calls: the New Zealand farmers, the Australian farmers, that was even before they joined WFO, the Danish farmers. Everybody asked me, oh, how do they plan to do that? There's a lot of pressure now on us from our governments too. We cannot get hold of them. And I said, neither can I. I have no idea, but I love the idea. Thank you also for the leadership you have shown in the global trade debates, which is extremely important on the topic of my intervention today on food security. It is especially a wonderful experience for me to be here at your conference, and good luck with your General Assembly later today, where you develop policies. You see, the most important function of any farmers' organization, no matter on which level, whether you operate on local level in your local town or village, or on county or district level, or on state, provincial level, or on national level, or supranational level, on the continent, in the region, or even on global level, the most important function of any farmers' organization is advocacy, is to influence policies. And I really enjoyed watching you trying to influence policymakers over the last day or so. But to influence policy, you need to have policy. And that is a luxury in any farmers' organization, because developing policies means that you need to create consensus amongst farmers. Farmers must agree to give a certain policy a mandate. And farmers are not the easiest constituency when it comes to policy making. And we are not all the same. No 2 farmers in the world farm the same. Farmers are entrepreneurs. They are decision makers. They are people who think for themselves and who do for themselves. And this is what makes it tougher to develop policies. But in the process of developing policies, you need to be informed by the environment and especially by science. Now, if you would forget that I've ever visited you, if you would forget everything I say today, try to remember this part. If policies are not science-based, they are useless. Because the answers to the difficult questions of our time must still be valid in 10 years from now, and in 20 years from now, and in 50 years from now. And that can only be done if our policies are science-based. And if the scientists point us out as farmers, if they give us the yellow card, then we must change. We cannot fight the science. This is why it is so important to stay close to the scientists. In WFO, we've actually set up a scientific committee. We simply asked all our members, bring the brightest scientists to whom you have access to the table, and let's consult them in all our policy-making processes. Let's make sure that our policies are based in proper science. You see, when we talk about food security, food systems, food value chains, we are not only talking about natural sciences. It's more and more important also to hear the voice of the social scientists and the economists and the communication scientists. They are becoming the most important people in our lives. It becomes more and more important every day how we get our message across, how we communicate to the consumers. There's no more important person in the life of a farmer than the consumer who stands in front of a shelf in a shop deciding what the family will have for dinner tonight. Because the world became an extremely small place for us. Every farmer is every day in competition with the best other farmers in the world. And food security no longer means that any country produce everything they consume. It means that you produce enough of that in which you have a competitive advantage so that you can exchange from the food basket for that in which you do not have a competitive advantage. Food security must always be measured on 3 levels. Global food security asks about the volume of food available in the world. And somehow, in the beginning of the COVID lockdowns, the foundations of that concept were shaken. Some countries closed their borders for export of staple foods. And there was a bit of a panic in the world. Will there be enough food? There has always been enough food in the world. Farmers are outproducing the demand for food. That's why we can still afford to have more than 30% food loss and waste. We are producing in different markets. We are producing to those who ask questions about the origin and the ways of production, who want to scan a QR code and see exactly how this pig was treated before it was slaughtered, or what was sprayed on this crop before it was harvested. That's the more affluent part of the market. But we are also producing into the middle class markets where the questions are about the mix on the plate. How nutritious is it? Is it a healthy diet which I can present to my family? And then there's a way too big part of the market who simply asks about affordability and availability. Can I feed my family tonight with what is available in my environment, and can I pay for it? There are close to 900 million people in the world who are uncertain what they will have for dinner tonight. And a large part of that market is in our neck of the woods in Africa. In Africa, around 98% of the farmers are classified as smallholders. And pardon me if I'm politically incorrect about it, but it's so necessary to say it, that those NGOs and development aid agencies who work very hard to romanticize smallholder farming in Africa is actually keeping our farmers poor, preaching against the use of fertilizers or improved seeds or mechanization. Smallholder farming in the current paradigm in Africa is nothing more than a poverty trap, and there's nothing romantic about that kind of poverty. To the contrary, the youngsters run away from it. They don't want that life. If farming is not profitable, it is not sustainable, because farming is a business, and you need to link up with markets where you can sell your surpluses at a profit. I had this discussion last week with one of the development aid agencies, the church-based one. They said, but don't you understand that we are simply following the philosophy of Confucius, who said, don't dish out fish, rather teach people how to fish. This is what we are doing. I said, but Confucius stopped short. He should have added, don't dish out fish, rather teach people to fish and give them a market, because only if there is a proper market, you can make profit, and farming then becomes a business. National food security asks about whether there is enough food in the country. And often you have enough food, but the food is not where the people are hungry, and it costs too much to get it there. The logistics around the distribution of food often cost more than the production of the food. And then there's the issue of food security on a household level. Many African countries, many countries in Southeast Asia and in Latin America do have food security on a national level, but too many households cannot afford to buy the food. To say it in farmers' language, Europe must accept that as long as Africa is hungry, you will not sleep. Because nothing stops a hungry man. No fence, no door, no lock, no border, and no sea. People will go where they believe they can feed their families. And COVID has actually brought out the essence of this. COVID disrupted markets to the extent that a lot of food was lost on farm before it left the farm gate. Potatoes, milk, because the school feeding schemes were closed. The canteens in the workplaces, the informal hawkers on street corners. And farmers simply could not get their products to markets. But farmers across the globe quickly changed tact. Millions of farmers changed the way they farm or what they farmed to adapt to the new circumstances. Last year, we had the Food System Summit of the United Nations, which was a defining moment in advocacy. Minette will remember, so would Peter Kendall, whom I was privileged to run into again last night, the second president of the World Farmers Organization. You'll remember how hard we knocked on the doors of the Rome-based agencies, the United Nations agencies who deal with food and agriculture, to ask for access, to seek an opportunity to make the farmer's voice heard. And we kept on saying to the UN, we don't want to be invited to dinner. We want to be called to the kitchen. We want to be there where you decide on the menu. We want to be part of the planning. Because just as you are trying to influence policymakers on the national level here in the UK and the World Farmers Organization, we are targeting the United Nations and its agencies, and we are trying to influence global policies. And then all of a sudden, the dam wall broke about 2 years ago. And now we've run out of capacity to attend all the dinners, to go to all the kitchens. Now everybody is calling the farmers to hear from us. And I've been very reluctant to enlarge our secretariat. Now that we've gone so wide, even beyond our own expectations, it's important to go deeper, to develop better roots. I would rather see the World Farmers Organization tapping into the capacity of its members, sending not only the first, but also the second and the third tier of leadership on a national level to these meetings. And when the topic is about antimicrobial resistance, let those countries which are strong in pork farming, in chicken farming, in dairy, let them go there. Because if we have a solid policy, we can be sure that they will take care of the interest of all the farmers who have put their stamp on those policies. But I got the scare of my life in the run-up to the Food Systems Summit. There were times when I thought that I was watching a horror movie. There were times when I thought people are not serious around these high tables. My dear colleagues, there are really people who believe that the world can be fed without farms. There are really people who believe that if every human is served with an energy bar and a few tablets for all the micronutrients and vitamins which we need, that our food needs would be covered. More, that it would create a more equal society across the globe. And farmers are usually political problems. You would also sort out that kind of problems. That food can come from factories and laboratories. As if food is only about maintaining our bodies. And food is so much more. Food is a deeply social experience. You invite your friends or your family to dinner. It's also a very deeply religious experience across the world. Bread and wine has a special place for us as Christians, even for the Muslim community in the world. The fast, it's all about food. Food is much more than just its nutritional value. But we cannot shy away from the fundamental questions which we are being asked. The biggest mistake we can make at this juncture in time is to risk simple answers to all the difficult questions we are being asked as farmers. Questions about health, questions of what we produce and especially how we produce it, questions about biodiversity in nature, questions about climate change. No one is as vulnerable to climate change as the world's farmers are. And no one can do more about it in a shorter space of time and on a broader basis than the world's farmers can. Every farmer knows exactly what he or she can do better on their farms. And it's important that we do that. And it's important that we tell the world that we are doing it. Because let's be honest, farming is not in harmony with nature. It never was. Nature will always seek balances. Nature does not provide surpluses. To provide surpluses, to produce surpluses, you need to take out the competition. That's why we are doing weeding in our fields. That's why we kill insects on our fruits. That's why we fight predators amongst our livestock. But because no one lives as close to nature as we do, I've never come across a farmer who does not have a very special place in his or her heart for the forces of nature, for life, because we are in the life business, who's not prepared to bend backwards to ensure that we nurture her, who does not understand how dependent we are on nature. While we have fended off a number of the onslaughts on the food systems when it comes to farming, we had a few sensitive moments in those debates around livestock farming. Very pertinent questions were being asked about livestock farming. I have seen, especially in Europe, how things start with animal welfare regulations, animal welfare legislation. Nothing wrong with that. We must always strive to achieve higher standards. But then it becomes animal comfort and animal happiness, as if we know exactly what makes an animal happy. And it moves on to animal rights and the right to live and not to be eaten. Because for the very first time in our history, we sit with more people living in cities than in the rural areas. For the very first time, we have a generation of people who have no linkages to a farm, who no longer have an uncle or a grandpa on a farm. And their experience of food ends at a shelf in a shop, and the world behind the shelf is unknown to them. And this is where this kind of pressure comes from. And no one is going to solve this problem other than we ourselves. We must communicate better to the people who buy our products. And in this communication, we must introduce the real world of producing with your fingers in the soil to our consumers. It became one of the most important challenges of our time. Don't save on the costs of a proper communication system. You see, when we saw that things went west for the debates in the Food System Summit, we decided as Farmers' Constituency that we must go for a special structure on sustainable livestock farming, and we must involve the scientists in that. And now we are asking our farmers' organizations to put pressure on their governments to join that sustainable livestock committee to make sure that livestock will retain its rightful place in the farming arena across the globe. Amongst the threats against farming and against food security is not only climate change, also trade issues, also policy issues. We must make sure that we ask the difficult questions too, and that we keep on asking them until they are answered. And I'll give you a simple example. In these debates around livestock and the push to replace animal proteins with plant-based proteins, the Dutch government decided that it would reduce its national herd with 30% in the next 9 years. And those are mostly dairy cows. The Dutch have some of the best genetics in dairy cows in the world. The average yield of Holstein Friesland is around 30 liters of milk per day. That's what they want to reduce with 30%. But in this announcement, the Dutch government also acknowledged that elsewhere in the world, we even need to expand the national herds, like in Africa, where we have a desperate shortage of proteins, especially the availability of proteins to pregnant mothers and children up to the age of 2, the first 1,000 days from conception. They said, in a country like Ethiopia, for example, we even need more cattle. But the average yield of an Ethiopian cow is around 1 liter of milk per day. That's what we want to expand. It makes no sense when it comes to climate change as the driving force behind these policies. So to feed an extended family in a village where you might need 100 liters of milk per day, you can service that with 3 Dutch cattle or 110 Ethiopian cattle. The real answer is that we need more Dutch cattle in Ethiopia. That means we need more Dutch investment in Ethiopia. But it's not happening because the policy environment in Ethiopia is not conducive to investment or profitable business. That's the issue that should be addressed. And if we do not keep on saying it, they will keep on trying to work from the wrong end of the debate. I want to make a plea for going beyond advocacy. The car amongst the horses is a new approach in farmers' organizations to go beyond advocacy, to use our networks and our access to farmers, to start with action-orientated initiatives, like you have done by committing to net zero. Yes, it also has a place in your campaigns to do advocacy. But now the policymakers must come to you, and not you to the policymakers. Going beyond advocacy means that you put the ball in their court. The very last thing which I wish to do before the end of my term in June, and I want to share it with you because I want to sell this dream to you too. I hope to get enough support for a farmer-to-farmer pledge on soil health. Because when you talk climate change, or nature, or biodiversity, our American colleagues hear party politics, and they shy away from it. When you talk about climate-friendly agriculture, climate-smart agriculture, many farmers think if I do everything right on my farm but my neighbor does nothing, it will boil down to nothing, because the climate covers us all. But more than 90% of what a farmer can do about climate change is being done in the soils. And your soils go nowhere. It's yours. There's no more important investment you can do on your farm than in the health of your soils. I want to get enough farmers to sign a pledge, a farmer-to-farmer commitment, that I will leave this little portion of the planet, of which I'm the custodian, for a very short time in its existence, that I will leave this piece of land in a better condition to the next generation than what I found it in. Because if enough farmers can do that, we will address most of the challenges we have with climate change, with biodiversity issues, with nature. And we will really be remembered as the generation of farmers who made that difference, because it would be hard for a next generation to drop the ball. I want to challenge you to join such a movement and see if we can heal the planet by ourselves and for ourselves. That is going beyond advocacy. Thank you, Minette.
Amazing. I mean, I just think, and most people probably in this audience will not be aware of how the world's farmers have. I mean, it amazes me when I see, and indeed the only way actually I've been able to talk to many other farmers across the world, and they have come and seen us, the Argentinians, the Canadians, the Russians. We've got a lot of European farmers in this audience. I believe Australia, Fiona Simpson, my opposite number, they have finally just signed up and become members of the World Farmers Organization. So who would you say is the sort of missing link? I mean, to me, China is the one. Japan is a member. China is still yet to join. Do you think there is hope that China will join up?
The Chinese have spoken to us many times, but one of the strict conditions of membership of the World Farmers Organization is that the Farmers Organization must be independent of the state. We cannot host a government in the structures. And the Chinese Farmers Organization is not independent of the state. And it's a thin line. There are many other countries too where the line between state and civil society is blurred, and where you will find that the farmer's leader He's also the chairman of a portfolio committee in Parliament. So if you need to influence policy, you need to influence yourself. Strong civil society infrastructure is one of the biggest assets any country can have. And in World Farmers Organization, I think the founding fathers already decided that we will be very strict on this. Farmers Organization must be independent.
Yeah, and that has been incredibly important. And I don't think you realised, and I certainly didn't realise, that Lord Henry Plum, who was with us yesterday and last night, who is 97, I have to say, if I'm like him at 77, I'll be pretty chuffed. But Lord Plum was the president of the predecessor, effectively, of the WFO, IFAD, which I didn't know, and I don't think you knew either.
Only learned about it yesterday.
Yeah, incredible, incredible. I want to open it up, and please do. We've got the microphones here. We've got about 15 minutes to have some questions. So anybody that wants to ask Theo a question, please do come to the microphones. I'll bring a question up from Ali Kappa in a minute, but anyone do feel free. I'm keen, there's so much that we could discuss. I mean, I remember when you talked about influencing in Rome in particular, where your secretariat is based, but there was no farmer representation on the World Food Security Committee until I think probably about 8 years ago through the WFO.
2 years ago.
2 years ago it finally happened, my goodness. So no farmer representation whatsoever. And when I look ahead to the COP27, the one in Egypt, how do you see, I think it was very interesting, the pledge that you talk about, the farmer to farmer leadership and going beyond advocacy. How do you see, or what do you see the importance of COP27 in being able to achieve, bearing in mind that the Paris Accord was really what put, I guess, agriculture, farming on the world map to be a big part of the solution on climate change?
No, Minette, when the world signed the Kyoto Protocol, there was nothing about agriculture in it. 2 references to food security, but agriculture was not there. Somehow the negotiators shied away from involving the farmers because it's the big political constituency in every country. I remember very well when I was the president of the Southern African Confederation of Agricultural Unions back in 2011 at the COP in Durban, how hard we worked to try to get agriculture on the agenda. And then in the run-up to Paris, I was then with the Pan-African Farmers Organization. The farmers' organizations across the globe joined together to say agriculture must be in this agreement. And even there, we were a bit disappointed. It was just referred to as a kind of a side remark. And then all of a sudden, agriculture became the main focus. 2 years ago, it felt as if we were blamed for everything that is wrong in our food systems, and especially with regards to our footprint on agriculture. And that was where it was in Katowice, in Poland, that the farmers' constituency, one morning in one of the meetings which Keres chairs in every morning at COP, farmers' constituency said, let's grab the initiative. Let's put the ball in their court. And the way we went about it was to set up the Climb Makers campaign. And we partnered up with literally every farmer structure we could find on the face of the earth. Farmers networks which are not part of WFO or of any other continental structure. And we started to have these workshops in every region, in Latin America, in the Caribbean, on the small islands in the Pacific, asking farmers these 2 questions. What can you do on your farm to tread a little lighter across your pastures and on your fields? What contribution can you make to adapt to climate change and to mitigate? And secondly, what would it take to get it done? What do you need to get it done? knowing that the answers we would get from Asia will be radically different from the answers we get in North America. Solutions in Africa will not be solutions in Europe. And then we started to compile this, on the one hand, to exchange it, because farmers learn more from other farmers than from anyone else, but also to show the world that there are no silver bullets. There's no one-size-fits-all solutions. And at the end, we hope to compile a kind of a climate-smart agriculture Bible. We want to present that to the United Nations and say, this is what the farmers of the world believe they can do, and this is what we need to get it done. And then put the ball in their court.
I think it really struck me this year at the COP26 in Glasgow, which from our government's point of view was all about nature-based solutions. I have to say, when I finally got into the main plenary session, which was only through the WFO, I was representing the World Farmers Organization. And no one looked more surprised than George Eustice when I was there with all the other secretaries of state from across the world, able to talk about, and this is your point about empowerment, able to talk about what we are doing on net zero and how we see the solutions to that. And the point of empowering farmers too, I think, is very key in this world of social media. The celebrities in that main plenary session, Idris Elba was there giving his intervention, and of course, massive, massive media interest. Again, they were very much talking about small farms. Go back. I mean, how much are we hearing this at the moment? Go back, go back, go back. You know, 1950s agriculture, that is the way forward. So empowering the real voice is more and more important, because otherwise it becomes greenwashed at scale by others who are just looking effectively to greenwash their conscience. And we see it happen time and time again. So I think the power of that movement is enormous. I'm keen to just ask you quickly, your farm. I remember when we were talking about at the COP skyrocketing fertilizer prices and where that was headed, and you explained how the rail network across South Africa is just, you know, in a very, very bad state. And then you went on to explain how you had just a few days' notice of when your electricity was going to be off and planning your irrigation around those cycles with just a few days' notice. Can you just bring to life very briefly, Theo, what it is like farming in the Kruger National Park?
Yeah, I'm not farming in the park.
Or on the edge of the, yeah. Might not be here if you want.
I'm just outside the Kruger Park in the Drakensberg Mountains.
Yeah.
I'm farming subtropical fruits, macadamias and avocados and mangoes. We farm with very big workforces. They come from all over Africa. So about 80% of my workers are Zimbabweans. You'll remember that I was nominated to the World Farmers Organization by the Zimbabwean farmers. I do not really represent the South African farmers' constituency. Because my family used to farm in Zimbabwe, and they lost everything in one day with the expropriation campaign there. That morning, when they checked in their laborers, they did not know that tonight they will no longer be on the farm. And it's right next door. And if Zimbabwe sneezes, we also catch the cold in South Africa. But just like what happened in Zimbabwe, the moment there is political uncertainty, the moment you bring property rights into the debate, investors run away. And the most important investor on any farm is the farmer himself. I farm trees. The macadamia trees which my workers are planting today on the farm, I will only start harvesting them in 2029. So foremost in one's mind is it worthwhile planting them? I might not have the farm anymore in 7 years from now. And when investors run away, you also see the collapse of infrastructure. We fix roads ourselves. Every farmer fixes the road as it goes through his or her farm because it's cheaper than buying new tires
all the time. And it's hard to do government's job without government's income. So our power utility also went through the floor. We have this outages, we call it load shedding, every day. Now you have no idea what the schlep it is to start all your pumps again, to reprogram your irrigation when you have a load shedding. And one try to organize your day around that. So farmers have started to take care of their own safety. We have farm patrols every night, safeguarding the area. We have emergency plans. We can close our valley within a few minutes if an incident occurred. And then, of course, we are working very hard to replace certain government functions such as tertiary education for farmers, such as the training of veterinarians. Mm-hmm. If you do not invest in that, you're going to run into trouble 10 years or 20 years down the line. But it all costs a lot of money. The investment is worthwhile, not for the colleges we have set up, the university we have set up, not for the value in better rural safety, but the energy it unleashes amongst farmers. When farmers work together, when farmers sweat together, they become brothers and sisters.
Very true. I can see we've got the questions. Joe, lovely to see you there too. Ali, let's have your question, and then Joe Stanley.
Good morning. I think I just want to start by saying thank you. This has been a fantastic session. Am I the only person in the room that feels like that? I'm completely inspired. And amongst the people that I'm sitting with, we all want to know where we can sign your pledge, please. So before this session ends, can we have a clear action as to how we sign up the Farmer to Farmer pledge? Because there's quite a few people sitting around me that want to sign your pledge. My question is about climate change. Climate change is going to drive migration if we listen to the evidence and the science. And it's going to drive huge migration potentially. So my question is, with what's ahead of us, where should we, as farmers of the world, be growing tomorrow's food for the world's citizens? Because there's going to be a lot of change.
I hope I heard it properly. I heard the question about, given the reality of climate change, what will we do different in future in terms of what we produce now we produce? Is that right?
It is, and I think, Ali, making the point about the sort of moral imperative of where, I mean, Emma Howard-Boyd is following you as chairman of the Environment Agency. We have too much water in this country and too little in other parts of the country. And, you know, we should be able to have the opportunity to move water around, but we have the luxury of a maritime climate. You don't have that. And as we see a world that is going red, you know, where the point Ali is asking is, where are we going to be producing the food? Do you still feel, you know, the point on the macadamia nuts, you are facing massive other political issues that are different to water. Where will we be producing that food? And that will lead, of course, to the migration of people as well. Do you see, I mean, Africa, there is so much potential. Do you see that being fulfilled, Theo?
You know, those farmers in Africa, that's my home constituency. When I was president of the Pan-African Farmers Organization, I had the opportunity to visit 44 of the 54 countries in Africa. And I really went to the deep rural areas. I met farmers on their farms. I spoke to them about their aspirations and their dreams and their frustrations. Now, we will need, within our lifetimes, to feed 2 billion more people. It means that we need to upscale without doing deforestation, without hurting nature in the process. So we need to produce more on less and with less. That is the core of our challenge, to produce more on less with less. And around 46% of the world's underutilized agricultural land is in Africa. Now, I want to answer you in this way. There was a time just after the Second World War when the Kaiser Showa in Japan said, this country has been destroyed in this war. How will we get on our feet again? He challenged the Japanese to work harder, to be more productive, to dream with him of a day, he said, 25 to 30 years from now, when no country in the world must be in a position to afford it not to do business with Japan. And some of you might remember in the 1960s and the 1970s, you could go into any small shop and you can buy something made in Japan, but it was cheap stuff. It was low technology. It was unreliable. It was Kaiser Miki in 1975 who said, let's rebrand this dream. Let's change the brand made in Japan to high technology, reliable, expensive stuff. And look where it brought them in one lifetime. Today, it's one of the biggest economies in the world. Whom of you would have believed it if you were told in the 1980s that China would today be such a dominant force in the global economy? Something magnificent happened in China in 25 to 30 years. Can that be done in Africa? Being an African myself, I believe in it with every cell in my body. It can happen through agriculture. There's only one way to destroy poverty, and that's by creating wealth. And there's no sector in the economy of Africa or of the world that can create more wealth in a shorter space of time and on a broader basis than agriculture can. But then you must do away with hand-hoe farming. You must embrace new technologies, especially precision farming, data-driven agriculture. We must commercialize agriculture in Africa. We must modernize it. We must mechanize it. We must turn smallholder farmers into small entrepreneurs who are making profits. Because a majority of them have never chosen to be farmers. Life just found them there. And if they could have a choice, they would probably not have chosen that life. So the challenge is the transfer of technology and the transfer of expertise. And I can never say thank you enough for those organizations who got involved in agricultural development in Africa. Those farmers in Europe, in the USA, who practically started with the transfer of technologies, who rolled up their sleeves to do something about it, because we do not have that much time to change it.
Very good. Joe.
Thank you, Minette. Yesterday, Minette pointed out that we have, in this country now, a rather confrontational relationship with our own government when it comes to food and farming and landscape policy. And that is oftentimes forces the industry, forces our industry in this country to then compare ourselves with our fellow farmers around the world. Which is something that I think that many farmers in this room often feel very uncomfortable with, that we feel that we're sort of forced into that position in order to justify, our own positions within this country to our own government. What would you say are the common threads that unite us all as farmers around the world, and how can we work more closely together? How can we work more closely in concert with each other to push and to sort of go beyond advocacy as you said, and to really to act as more of a concerted, farmers' union around the globe to advance some of the essential things that you've been talking about today?
There are many farmers' organizations who feel that their governments are governing against them, that governments make it harder for them to be competitive rather than easier. And you sense it the moment you walk into their meetings. This is what they talk about, a policy environment that is not conducive to competitive farming. It was very interesting to me to also experience it here. But then there's so much we can learn from each other on how you do advocacy in a hostile environment. You see, it is not only about the production of the food. It is not only about being competitive in global markets. It's also about the maintenance of the rural spaces in every country. And there's a lot of sympathy for that, even in the cities. In our neck of the woods, in southern Africa and in East Africa, the rural areas became a battlefield for failed small villages and towns. Because a small town in our context only exists because there are enough young farmers with young children to keep the doors open of a primary school or a church or an input provider, agribusiness. If one of those fall over and farmers have to travel to the next bigger town to do their business, all the business go there, and then these towns collapse. It's about having a rural alternative to urbanization so that young people can make a choice not to be part of the rat race in the cities. And for that, there's a lot of political muscle in farmers' organizations. No one is better organized on all levels, from local to international, than the world's farmers are. We are still the biggest profession in the world. We are the oldest profession in the world, and we are the best organized profession in the world. So it is possible today, especially because of new communications technologies, to take hands and put pressure on governments to ensure that we retain this rural alternative to city life, and to assist each other to maintain our competitiveness.
I'd love to carry on and on, Theo, but we have Emma Howe-Boyd waiting, and I know, Emma, you have a meeting to get to. So conference, please, will you show your appreciation for Theo De Jager?